not very far from here, there's a rock called Skellig Michael, which is a 700-foot triangular little island, 7 miles off the coast of Kerry, and it's a magnificently impressive place, just rising up out of the ocean, and it looks pretty inaccessible and inhospitable. But when you go there, you'll find that there are steps cut into the side of the rock. I think nearly 700 steps. And when you get to the top, you will find a little monastery. At least it was a monastery for about 600 years. And the way of life there was simple. In beehive huts, the traditional form of structure in this part of the world at that time, and a common place of worship. And it was typical of a form of monasticism that flourished here in Ireland and in Britain, called Celtic monasticism, part of Celtic Christianity, that was later came into conflict somewhat with Roman Christianity, and eventually the Celtic Church, which was much less centralized and much less organized than Rome. Rome, of course, inheriting the imperial mantle, liked to organize and centralize everything. But the Celtic Church was an amalgam of churches and with remarkably similar patterns of worship and approach to spirituality over a huge amount of time and a large area. And so Skellig Michael is in a way a typical expression of this marginality of the Celtic monk, but also the strong sense of community. I mean, why on earth, I went out there a couple of years ago with some of my family members and American cousins as we were halfway there on the boat, and everyone feeling a bit seasick, said, what on earth did they come out here for? And actually when we had walked up to the top of the mountain, and we fell silent at this mysterious and wondrous example of the human spirit in search of its meaning and source. There wasn't a verbal answer, but I think everybody understood why they had come here, because of what we were seeing there and experiencing there. What's interesting, of course, is that they had gone out to such an isolated place in search of solitude, but had gone there with others, which is quite paradoxical. And that combination of solitude and community is a very integral part of Celtic monasticism, more than of Benedictine monasticism. And I think it's a very contemporary form of monasticism. And I'd like to reflect with you in these conferences in the coming days about some of the insights and some of the characteristics of that form of Celtic Christianity and Celtic monasticism in particular, which speaks quite directly to the spiritual search of many of our contemporaries, and that we can feel strangely familiar with as we reflect upon it and learn about it. One of the key elements of the Celtic monastery was pilgrimage. Benedict had his emphasis was upon stability, physical stability in the monastery. whereas the Celtic monk had a great attraction to, and a sense of responsibility even, to leave home. They would sometimes even say, you cannot be a monk in your own country. So they were great pilgrims, and they brought their spirit and their faith and their genius all over Europe and into Russia and deepest part of southern Europe, and some say even to North America on their voyages. We'll look tomorrow at one of the great exemplars of this pilgrimage monk, St. Brendan the Navigator. But, as I say, central to this free but very disciplined ascetical life of the Celtic monk was the idea of pilgrimage. And we are all pilgrims. We've all come here from other places, almost. And we come to an island. And islands are rather magical places. Islands are places where you have a sense of freedom, of disconnection from the mainland and the busyness and the commerce and the activity. People from Singapore might not agree with that, which is also an island, but it was like that originally. And but an island attracts us, I think, or attracts many people. And even here on the island, many of the islanders have said to me, and I feel the same, it's quite nice to know that the last ferry has gone. Some of you may get very anxious at that idea and Colin, ferryman, or the Murphy ferry, will be happy to come out at any time of the day or night to take you off if you desperately need to. So you're not imprisoned here. But there's a feeling of liberation that comes with the sense of disconnection. And I hope you feel that and allow that to expand you in these days. So first of all, you're pilgrims, and secondly, you're islanders. And what does that say to you? How does that offer you a chance to expand beyond your normal horizons? But the Celtic monks, of course, had to sleep and live somewhere on their various pilgrimages and explorations. And where they stayed was called a cell. And the monastic cell has the same word as a prison cell, but it's a completely different concept of cell. A prison cell is where you have been forced to go, and a monastic cell is where you've chosen to go. I mean, a prison cell is a place where you are deprived of liberty, and the monastic cell doesn't have a lock on the door, but it's a place where you discover what liberty means as you free yourself from your own internal bonds, attachments, and maybe your psychological prisons as well. So I'd ask you to think about these things, the pilgrimage. You've all made a pilgrimage to come here. Think about the being on an island, and think of your cell. Your cell is where you come from and go back to each day. And you have to love your cell, you have to come to love it. It may, depending on what kind of background you come from, it may not have all the facilities or the mod cons that you would like. But don't get distracted by the physical limitations of it. See it as a place in which you can flourish. You can put down some roots spiritually in that place, and but you will be detached from it by the end of the retreat. So roots and detachment at the same time. And we'll be practicing that in the schedule, because you will be leaving your cell to come with the other monks here for some prayer and community and reflection together, because we all grow in wisdom through sharing. And then we go back at those times to ourselves. So the cell is a place of self-knowledge. It's a place of solitude, but it's also the foundation of friendship. Absolutely central to the Celtic idea, and even to Benedict's idea of monasticism, is friendship. The monks don't have families, they don't have children, but they have friendship. And although in our culture we think of friendship as a lesser good than a more romantic ideal of love, friendship is a very key spiritual ingredient of our human journey to wholeness. So solitude and its relationship to friendship. Solitude is something you discover and embrace and maybe struggle with in your cell. So the cell will be home, and the home is where you can be yourself. You don't have to wear anything special. You can eat as much or as little as you like. Home is where you can be yourself. But it is also the place where sometimes you have to struggle to be yourself. In a way, what we're living here in these days is a form of monastic life that was is called a skete, S-K-E-T-E, and the skete is a form of life in which you have small cells, but you have a central place, and the monks meet and gather in that central place, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly. And it's halfway between the cenobitical way of life, which was where you all live in a big monastery. That's our idea of the Benedictine monastery of the Middle Ages, with one big building and with rooms going off down the corridors, and which is itself a kind of skete, but it's a physical unity on the one hand, and on the other hand you have the hermit living at the top of in a cave on the top of a mountain. So either way, there's a different forms of monastic life, but the skete is a combination of community and solitude. It comes from the word sketis, which was a valley in northern Egypt where Christian monasticism began to flourish in the 3rd, 4th centuries. And it comes from the Coptic word shiet, which means to weigh the heart. So the skete or the sketis is the place where you weigh the heart. And if you remember in the Egyptian hieroglyphics, in the Book of the Dead, the soul moves after life to a place and time of judgment. And the symbol of the judgment is where the heart of the person is placed on a scale, and I think a feather on the other, isn't it a feather on the other hand, which symbolizes truth. And that's the judgment. It's how does your heart balance with this relationship to truth. So that is perhaps a good way of understanding what we are doing here, weighing the heart, what we do in meditation, of course, as well. The Celtic monks didn't have a rigid timetable in the way that the Benedictine monks did, but they would usually rise at midnight, they would have one meal a day, and during the day they would not be trying to get the latest news or checking their email, they would be working. They worked quite hard, physically quite hard. They would do rope making or basket weaving, and their work, their manual work, which they did also in order to live, sell the ropes or sell the baskets. Their work was a form of meditation, prayer. So they were mindful in their work in a way that's very difficult for us. I think if you're a trader on the New York Stock Exchange, it's probably hard to be mindful of it, or to do it mindfully. So mindful doesn't mean obsessive. Could become obsessive. Anything could become obsessive. But the idea of the work, the manual work. So we don't have manual work for you to do, but the manual work you will do in your cells, do it mindfully. And if you can find a little piece of garden, either where you're staying or wherever, do some work there, clearing the leaves perhaps, or tidying it up, or and don't be commercially minded about it, saying, well, I'm renting this place, I don't have to tidy it up. Be generous about that. And if you see a bit of litter, God forbid, Bere Island just won the tidiest island. But there are occasionally little bits of litter around. So try to pick that up and dispose of it. So think of ways that you can work alone, mindfully, and love that side of it. So those are some of the thoughts we might take with us into the retreat, and we can explore some more of those Celtic images and Celtic ideas in the days ahead.